Hello and welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast, where it's not about getting the gig, it's about enjoying it. My name is Tanner Gus, I'm your host, and I am so honored to have you with me today. Before we get into it, I have one big announcement for you all, and that is that the Happy Musicians will be presenting at this year's Gen Conference, which is online, making it Gen X, the Jazz Education Network. It's going virtual January 6th to January 9th. And I am so pumped to be a part of it. I went several years as a youngster, and it was always one of the most enriching and motivating weeks of the year. And I know there's a lot of virtual masterclasses and interviews and performances right now, but I don't think any of them compare to the scope of what's being offered over this 4-day stretch. There's an amazing amount of clinics and diverse opportunities for knowledge, and you get access to all of it with one pass. So I highly encourage you to check it out. I will be presenting a panel discussion on mental health and wellness on January 8th from 6 to 6:50 p.m. Eastern Time. Joining me will be the drummer Matt Wilson, who's a great friend and mentor and hero, and vibraphonist Sasha Berliner, who is incredible and making huge waves as a player and activist in person. And a third guest who I haven't pinned down yet, but should be announced within the coming weeks. So, I'm just pumped. That's all I gotta say. It's gonna be amazing, and I'm very honored for this opportunity and proud of Jen for including it. As far as I know, this is the first informal discussion on mental health that they featured in their program, and I hope that that continues in the years to follow. All right, this interview features Walter Smith III, who is, in my opinion, one of the most incredible saxophonists on the planet. And I had the great honor of studying under him for 2 years at Indiana University before he moved on to his current position as the Woodwind Chair at the Berklee College of Music. If you don't know Walter, some of his career highlights include performances with Terrence Blanchard, Roy Haynes, Christian McBride, Terry Lynn Carrington, and some of his current pursuits, like the group he leads with Matthew Stevens, the guitarist, In Common. They just have a new album out, and we're listening to part of it right now, as well as the Ambrose Akinmusire Quintet and Eric Harlan's Voyager. There's a much longer list, but for everyone's sake, let's just agree that it's impressive, to say the least. In my experience, it's not common for an artist to be a world-class performer and a world-class educator, and Walter is certainly that. Myself and everyone I know who's worked with him agree that he's an insanely dedicated and genuine and effective educator. So a lot of our conversation talks about his take on music school and how we can make that better. We also talk about his relationship with Instagram. He's one of the few accounts I follow that give me hope and inspire me on that platform, and give me a sense that you can actually share meaningful content. And if you don't follow him already, definitely should. He's on Instagram at WSmith3, and it's highly enjoyable. You'll get a sense for it in this episode. And we also trade stories of trying to talk to our heroes and embarrassing ourselves. So it's a really good time. I'm so glad that you're here with us. I appreciate it. That's all I got. I hope you enjoy, and please help me welcome Walter Smith III. Walter Smith III, welcome to the Happy Musicians Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tanner.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. I know the pandemic's been hard for everyone, and especially musicians. Like, we don't have a lot going on, but I'm most curious, as a germaphobe, what is like the existence of a airborne pathogen like this like?
Man, look, I've been ready for this for a long time. I don't touch anything anyway. I avoid all of the situations that now people are starting to learn to avoid, and like even down to the handshake, which I'm hoping that once this is under control and people are out and kind of returning to some sense of normalcy, that the handshake is also just gone forever.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel like there's no reason for us to touch to say hello, That's why we have a language, But
I was hoping that was the case, that it was like, listen, this was always the worst case scenario, and I'm ready for it. Because, well, and I'm laughing now because I know you're really into like The Walking Dead and like zombie preparedness and stuff. You're ready for whatever
Man,
comes.
that's what this felt like. It was like when it all started, it was like I got my family together, and it was almost like one of those scenes where it's like, all right, this is the training part, and we're gonna like do, we're gonna start running so that we don't get tired when we're out being chased by zombies, all that kind of stuff. We went through like a rigorous training thing, and there were some teaching moments. I
Hmm.
remember being in a grocery store with my daughter, and we had masks, and I was wearing gloves in there, but she didn't have gloves. I just told her to keep her hands in her pockets when we were in there. And she wanted to grab gum, and then she like grabbed the box. You know how there's gum at the checkout thing? She like took the it was something that I've never seen her do, but because she was worried about like all the germs and stuff, she just like went further than she was supposed to and grabbed the whole box of gum off the
Hmm.
shelf, and then like I was like, what are you doing? No.
You're infected.
Yeah, yeah. We definitely went to the hazmat scenario after that, just like hosing her down and, you know.
Oh, that is so amazing. I totally felt that way. I was like, man, there are so many things we do that up until now I haven't realized how gross they are. And
Hmm.
I was like, Walter got it. He was right. This is
Yeah,
ridiculous.
yeah. It's been a long journey, man, but, to finally be vindicated and everything is going my way, it feels good.
Yeah.
There is a silver lining to this.
I love it. Okay, I'd love to talk to you about social media, or I guess Instagram in particular, because I think that's the only platform you really use, that I know of. And you've like the stuff that you put on there has always struck me as just really valuable and entertaining. And I'm maybe curious just what your relationship with Instagram is like and why you enjoy using that platform.
Sure. Um, so I started with social media, um, I don't know, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, um, under directive of a label, so that you can promote tours and whatever they're releasing and all that kind of stuff. So I started under duress, and like
Mm-hmm.
early on, it was like, all the stuff like, hey, come to this concert, it was just like coming from men and directly to my feed and all that kind of stuff. And there was no real interest for me to be involved with it
Right.
or to figure out how it really worked or what the draw was to it at all. And then once I kind of got to the point where I was saying no, like no, I don't want to put that up. I'm not doing that kind of stuff. I still saw the value in like me needing to have some kind of social media, just not for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of thought about like meeting it halfway. Like, what are the things that I could do that will make me excited to do it or enjoy doing it on some level, but still, I don't know, have a purpose. So, was there a middle ground? And to me, it was just not posting anything about anything I'm doing professionally, like nothing about up until quarantine, like maybe once or twice was there ever anything of me like playing saxophone there.
Mm-hmm.
It was just like mostly kind of random stuff, whatever,
Yeah.
like something fun.
Hotel
Um,
lessons and
yeah, exactly. Like the point of it was more like I looked at it as a feed where like if you're going through everybody's stuff and it's like come to this concert, buy this, I'm selling this equipment, here's this new album, here's this, wait, now there's one thing that's not like selling me something, what is this? And
mm-hmm.
like those are the things that I'm drawn to, like some that it doesn't have to be funny, but something that's of interest to me, but it's not like a directed like call to action
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of just the stuff that I wanted to do. So it almost felt like all these random jokes that pop in my head or scenarios or situations that happen here and there. That was the place to like actually realize them. It's like, oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, okay, so now I'll start working on this thing for that. And it's not, it doesn't take me a lot of time to do stuff because people ask me, they're like, you must spend like 30 hours to do that. And it's not that kind of thing at all. Like if
Mm.
you saw, like I'm doing these on my phone in like maybe 10 minutes tops. Like it's
Okay.
so low production value and quick,
Mm-hmm.
because that's also a part of it. Like if I was going to spend time, this would have to be like a high production value thing, and I'd want to monetize it and do all that. This is just something in passing that I'm doing but
Mm-hmm.
having fun with. So to me, that's kind of the draw to doing and having that angle towards it. It's kind of the antithesis of what the point of social media is, to promote your stuff and show what you do, and to
Mm-hmm.
draw people into your world of that kind of stuff. But I guess the other thing that, without knowing it, that it's done for me is, it's kind of helped me to kind of identify with a certain group of people.
Mm-hmm.
So like after concerts, I know before I was using Instagram, people would come up to me and ask me questions, like the questions that I have like zero interest in, of like equipment questions or whatever.
Right.
Like I've been playing the same mouthpiece for 20 years, same horn for 20. I don't, I'm not, I just don't, it's not that I don't care what it sounds like, but every time I try something, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is way better. And then I'll just play that and like, was it better? Does it sound different? I don't know. Let me play the other one. Oh, the other one's way better. So I'm
Mm.
not like an equipment person to tell you the slight differences between this and that. And people would come up to me with those kind of questions or whatever. And now it's like everyone comes up to me with kind of joke or like a video game question or something that's like I can actually be interested in engaging in that conversation. And it's like 100% of the time. Sometimes
Yeah.
like where it's funny, where like I'll be standing, like I remember I played a concert with Ben Wendell, and then like we were both standing there right afterwards, like talking about, oh yeah, that song was funny. It was cool when this happened, blah blah blah. And these kids came up and like half of them went to me and were like, man, that was amazing. How did you play that? When you wrote this song, what were you thinking about? And then like the other ones came over to me. They're like, so what games you been playing lately? And it was funny because like, but I also just played a concert. Actually, I get it. I did this. So yes, I
Yeah.
deserve this.
That's
Yeah,
funny. I'd also rather answer a question about what game I'm playing than like what I was thinking about when I wrote something.
it's
Um,
fun, right? Yeah,
yeah.
it's because the music thing, it feels like that's the thing that everyone is doing and everyone has their own perspective. And I don't feel like, for the most part, anyone has, I don't want to say anyone has anything to say that's um, super important in those moments, but generally it's kind of like those conversations anyway. And if someone's really telling you the meaning behind something that you're really interested in, it's a really long conversation. And how
Mm-hmm.
often are you having those with someone you don't know and they're kind of like walking off of a stage or in passing, that kind of
Yeah, I
thing.
had to start a podcast to have those conversations.
Exactly.
um, but I think why I like your Instagram presence so much, and you said it's because it's kind of the opposite of what Instagram has turned into, which is everyone just like advertising their live streams now, especially, and selling stuff. And I'm guilty of that too. But it seemed like you approached it as just being yourself and creating a real personality and just doing things that were fun. Um, and I think all of that actually really speaks towards you as a musician because it's you as a person. Um,
Yeah,
yeah, it strikes me as
absolutely.
really authentic, which I appreciate.
Yeah, I think that's also, and again, the point of it is not to, not really trying to use that in a way to like monetize it, but in the end, I think that actually helps with monetization. Whereas if you're not selling something, then when you do have an album coming out or something, it's like people are checking for your stuff anyway. They
Mm-hmm.
like you or they don't like you. It's polarizing because there are a lot of people that are like, "What are you doing? You're like a clown, man. Come on,
Mm-hmm.
be serious." That kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it does kind of lead to people like, it's, what is it called? It's followers, right? But really, it's like fans of you and what you do, but really it has to be fans of like you as a person. And I think that that's where your support comes from. When
Mm-hmm.
you look at people that have Patreon pages and all that, people are putting money up for this stuff. So if they're going to do it, it has to be that something they feel some kind of connection to you, as a person, as an artist. But I think the personal side, is maybe the most important. So like you
Hmm.
said, authenticity is a big thing there.
Yeah. I also like to like it just seems like you put a lot of context to things. Lately you've been doing all these like jazz tunes that you really like and putting them to these little animations. And it's like the melodies. And I'd never hear just like a melody played on Instagram except on your page. It's always just like chopping out. Um, and it has like zero context. It's just someone jamming and going for it. And it's really refreshing to hear. And it's funny because it only takes you a few minutes, like you said, but just something that actually has meaning. It's this melody that with something behind it. And some of them I also didn't know. For like the theme for Ernie was one of the first ones I saw. And I just thought you had
Mhm.
wrote it because you found a little video of Ernie. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And then the next one I was like, oh wait, I know this tune. Oh wait, that must have been a tune. and I went and learned it. But I'm curious, I
Nice.
know you're big on learning tunes. And this is something I kind of go back and forth on. And I'm just curious what your relationship with learning tunes is and why you think that's so important.
Um, yeah, you know, it was kind of beat into me when I arrived, in Boston for college. When I was in high school, I knew some tunes, but it was mostly, everything was in the same key when they were all fast tunes, and it was like a certain thing where I could play a certain way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that specifically is like songs like Yes or No, or like Softly as in a Morning Sunrise, like those kind of songs where they have changes, but it's in a key and you can kind of play all around the key and then, do a certain thing, hold a note. And then I got to Boston and it was like a completely different scene. It was like playing like standards, and all the gigs were like that. And it was like not only playing the standards, but do you know the intro? Do you know the verse? Like, do you know this? And then it was like there were all those levels to it, and all the great saxophone players that were in Boston during that time. There was saxophone player Jimmy Green. There was Wayne Freed. There were a ton. Ellie DeGibri was in Boston at that time. Patrick Cornelius, Jaleel Shaw, um, Bob Reynolds.
Mm-hmm.
All those guys were like they knew all that stuff, and they were doing all these gigs. And I would go see them, and I'd want to sit in, and like they'd be like, "Well, what do you want to play?" And it was like, "Alone Together. Can we please play Alone Together?" Like, and it was like, "Okay, all right, cool. Let's count it off." And then they counted off really slowly, and then I was like, "But I can't play what I need to play at that tempo. Like, come on, guys, you know." So it became a thing, and then through that, um, just like necessity of needing to learn more, I started to learn about melody and how melody worked. I was forced to really get inside of playing in different keys, different tempos, which led to time signatures, which led to learning about musicians that I kind of had passed on or weren't really interested in
Mm-hmm.
before. Like I remember a big one for me was Wayne Shorter. The the year before I went to college, I did this program called Young Arts, which is like you had to send in a at that time a cassette tape playing three songs, and one of the songs I played was Yes or No, and I knew it from a Branford Marsalis recording, Random Abstract, the one with Kenny Kirkland, Delbert Felix, and Lewis Nash. And the first song on there is Yes or No, and I that was like my Bible. And then I remember thinking, well, if I'm gonna play this song, let me find out. I know it's written by Wayne Shorter because it says so in the real book.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I continue on and hear that?
Yeah.
And then I bought that. I believe it's Juju is the recording. And I remember playing like maybe 10 measures past when the melody ended, just being like, okay, yeah, this is awful. This guy can't even play his own tune. And like really feeling that way towards it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year, like 1 year later from that day, so like somewhere in, I don't know, October, November of
Mm-hmm.
my first semester of college, being in Tower Records and looking through stuff and looking for stuff with the songs that I'm trying to learn because I'm trying to transcribe them from records and really getting into all these different players than I had ever checked out. And hearing Wayne on the like on the speaker in the record store and not knowing who it was, but being like, wow, what is this? And then going over and being like, oh wow, Wayne Shorter, this is crazy. And then buying a bunch of Wayne stuff
Mm-hmm.
and going back and then understanding what he's playing and trying to learn how to play, like just your ears change and through learning tunes that kind of happened for me.
Yeah.
um it's the language that you could go anywhere and play with anybody, like it doesn't matter. Like I
Mm-hmm.
always looked at really advanced people, knew a bunch of Monk tunes and Joe Henderson tunes, so I knew based on how someone would play, like if I was going to play with them, that those were tunes I probably should have a handle on. So I would really like brush up on Monk tunes and like every week try to get like 3 or 4 of those in my kind of repertoire. It was just like this whole game of like looking at this person, what tunes do I think they would know, and then learning all that kind of stuff just kind of blindly. And
Mm-hmm.
then it led, I think by the time I left Boston, I knew somewhere between 400 and 500 tunes, which
Yeah.
was cool.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know those anymore, but there was a time, man.
Well, it seems like I guess why I get frustrated with learning tunes is that it seems like in New Orleans I was playing a lot of gigs with these older guys who had like the same book of 30 like really lame melodies that they played for decades, and that's all they would play. And sometimes it seems like learning tunes is you're just learning this because that's what you're supposed to learn, even if you don't care about the melody at all and it's not fun to play. And it really seems like you were finding more like jazz originals and stuff by jazz composers and melodies that you really cared about and adding those to your collection. Because I remember there were times where at IU someone would call something, I don't know, like All of Me, and you'd be like, oh, I don't know it, because you as like a we're not playing All of Me kind of thing.
Right. Well, see, there are two different things because when
Hmm.
when I was at IU, you knew me as a teacher, right? So if
Yeah,
I'm in a scenario where we're playing a session and someone calls all of me or all of you, I don't remember which one you said, all of
All of
me.
Me.
That's a bit right. So
Hmm.
like what I was trying to do is I know what the tune list is at
Hmm.
IU, right?
Ah,
Those are the only songs that you know and play ever, then you're not actually on a path to like becoming what you want to be. Like
hmm.
those need to be a baseline of songs, but you need to know all these other songs. So I would always try to call as many songs off that list as I could to avoid doing those, because especially if I'm there or if one of your teachers is there, it should be a moment where you like are using your knowledge beyond what the baseline is for school. What I
Okay.
mean? That's how I always look at it.
Yeah.
And I know that I was always in situations where people would call tunes, and if I didn't know them, the first thing that I was going to do, either later day or the next day, was learn those songs, and not because like I was going to play with them in the near future and wanted to be able to prove that I could play them, just because it's stuff that people play. I want to learn it. So it was also that kind of like, all these things that you're trying to put out to people without like being specific about why you're doing it, just like trying to a little bit of the vibe of like how
Hmm.
this stuff is supposed to look, how this is supposed to go away from like the school setting. So
Yeah.
that was more the vibe of it. But those are great tunes. If they weren't great tunes, people wouldn't know them. People wouldn't
Hmm.
play them, right?
Right.
And again, like to me, every one of those songs, even the simple ones, like I remember one of the first songs that I learned was the song "Serenade to a Coup." Have you ever heard that before?
Hmm.
It's like a Rasan Roland Kirk
Okay.
song. It's really simple. Um, and like if I sang it to you, or like if you heard it, you would likely be able to like transcribe it and the changes right away. Like it goes through really specific things. But like the funny thing with to me with improvisation and composition, all this stuff, is that you learn more and more complex things and you continue to get more and more knowledge. But in the end, when you play or when you write, all that stuff, um, in order to make that complex stuff work, you need to be thinking about it in a very simple way. And like
Hmm.
those songs that I used to think were like so basic and all that kind of stuff, just the way they construct melodies is like very keen insight towards how to make the complex stuff work. So like knowing all the simple, quote unquote, simple stuff that is devoid of like extra chords, uneven phrases, all that kind of stuff, and all the complicated stuff. Like when you understand both sides and have like a real handle on it and know like a bunch of simple songs and a bunch of complicated songs, it gives you
Hmm.
more perspective towards how to play on them
Yeah.
and when you should play a certain way on things. I mean, again, when you should, I'm speaking like towards your own musical aesthetic, but like if the song is really simple, um, well, I don't want to make it that simple. Just saying both are really valid
Right.
and very important towards learning, and especially when you funnel that towards how you're going to write and how you're going to play stylistically.
Hmm. Well, and I feel that way too. Like when the first time you listen to Wayne Shorter, like you're like, what is this? This is like, I'm not into it at all. I do think there's like so much of my musical journey has been based on like what I'm really resonating with at the time, and then
Hmm.
following that, and going down that rabbit hole. I remember I never really got into kind of Blue until like this pandemic, and now it's like been
Hmm.
like the album I've listened to the most. And maybe one thing about school that gets frustrating is that like you are forced to care about things when you have a class about it, and then you have to learn
Hmm.
about it, as opposed to and like learning these tunes when they're on your jury list. And it sounds like your process was more like whatever I'm into, I'm going to learn a bunch of, and I'm going to learn a lot of tunes, not because I have to and they're on a list, but because I just am really interested in learning a lot of tunes. And maybe if it wasn't like you have to learn this tune this week, and it was like find a tune that you like and learn it, and we'll go over it kind of thing, that would be give students more agency and power. I think it, I don't know what you feel about
Well,
that.
possibly, but like, okay, so remember when I was telling you I came to Boston and didn't know any of those songs?
Mm-hmm.
I already knew the songs I liked, right?
Ah.
But if they didn't force me into a scenario where I had to learn this other world of music, um, I never would have done it. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't anything I was interested in, you know what I mean? But
Okay.
through those things, that's why the school thing, I think the biggest thing that I think where people go wrong is the time management thing and um, and the ability to do multiple things at once. So like I'm telling you with social media, I'm doing it in 10 minutes, 15 minutes tops. Like I might be sitting uh, at the deli waiting for them to like cut sausage for me or something. And like
Mm-hmm.
while I'm doing that, I'm like looking through to find the video clips that I'm going to put to this song that I'm doing, right? And then when it's done in that 45 seconds, minutes, I've accomplished something there. So when you look at it in a school scenario, if your teacher's telling you, okay, next week we're gonna this song, and you may have no interest at all, it's someone that you respect musically that has been through a lot of stuff that's looking at you in this moment and thinking, you know what would be good for you? It's this.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's right or wrong, it's someone's opinion. And for you, your job as a student is to do that. But that's not your only job for that week. And this is where I think the problem always falls in. It's like the concert mindset, like
Mm-hmm.
working towards concert and like I remember that vibe at IU. Sometimes like it would be like in November and you'd start working on it in September and then like finally, okay, now we did the concert. All right, I'm not coming to school tomorrow. Like I'm done. Woo.
Yeah.
And it's like, dude, if this was the real like scenario, like and you're a professional musician and it took you 2 months to prepare for any concert that then you would need a week off afterwards, I would be very curious to know what that concert is. And not saying that it doesn't exist, but like very rare is the time where you can devote that much time exclusively to one thing and then take a break afterwards. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think this idea of like, yeah, the whole point of school is you're not always going to like what you're doing, but the point of any college is to open up your your perspective and to change and to expose you to things. So if that wasn't happening, it would be a disservice on the college's part. So yes, you're forced to listen to, I don't know what it would be for a drummer. Maybe it's like Roy Haynes this week. It's like you're gonna listen to this Roy Haynes with Train and learn what's this, Dear Old Stockholm. Learn how he plays behind the second chorus or whatever.
Hmm.
And you might be like, dude, I have no interest in this. Okay, so treat it as an assignment. It's like craft. It's a method. Go in the practice room, learn it, and that's it. But once you're finished with it, that's it, because it doesn't have to be a huge exploratory thing, because your teacher is going to take you through that. You have to do your part, become familiar with it, learn what you're supposed to learn, and then show up and present that. And then the conversation happens, right? If there's something else you want to learn, that's what you need to sit down with for the rest of that week. And you're spending all your time on that, right?
Mm.
The assignment is like a small portion of that. You do what is required for the assignment and then present. That's when the learning happens. But your time by yourself, like all the other stuff, and that's like the priority always.
I like that a lot. Makes a lot of sense. I have to tell my yes or no story. In New Orleans, I had like been shedding a bunch of Wayne Shorter tunes with some friends like during the week, and felt all bad on that. And then went to sit in with, and when I got up on stage, he just goes, "What's your baddest shit?" And I panicked and called yes or no, and he looked at the saxophone player and he said, "Do you know it?" He said, "Yeah," and then just left the stage and did not play it. And that's how my first sit-in experience with him went. Um,
Nice.
so yeah.
I could tell you mine too, but not here.
Fair enough. That's awesome. Okay, I'm very curious. I'd love to talk more about just your perception of music school, especially because so like you got your undergrad as with an ed degree, so you didn't
Mhm.
really like go through the same process per se that students now who are taking all these improvisation classes and stuff are going through.
Right.
And I'm curious if you feel like that gives you a different perspective, and how that has changed your approach as an educator now.
Well, the way that it's changed my approach is mainly because I had I had lessons for the first 4 semesters and then none after that. And those lessons, Berkeley lessons, are half an hour lessons if you're not a performance major. So we're talking like a lot of, very short, concentrated moments. And George Garzone and Bill Pierce, the people that I studied with when I was at Berkeley, uh, both are not the type of teachers that give you a book and say we're going to work out of this and do the first 20 pages or whatever by next week. It was more conceptual, and you write out the stuff and you figure it out, and then when you come, we'll follow up. So it was with Bill Pierce, there was a lot of harmonic stuff that he would mention, and he would cite a song that happened in, and then I would learn that song and kind of figure out different ways to navigate it, and then show up and he would put it in different places. Garzone was a lot of composing without the saxophone, writing stuff down, just writing, playing in a certain way. So what that experience led me to, post having lessons and um, finishing the music ed degree, and then also like up until now has just been this vibe of like, if there's something I want to learn, I just need to figure it out on my own.
Mm.
And because those things that I'm able to figure out, even if it takes longer than opening a book and seeing the answer right there, are actually, they actually stick with me, and it's figured out in a way that makes sense to me. We already know learners come in a lot of different shapes and sizes. There are visual learners, oral learners, some people that need to learn whatever. There are a lot of ways that it happens,
Hmm.
and for me, I'm a strong believer that if you figure something out, even if you're calling it the wrong name and your approach to figuring it out is not logical to me, it doesn't matter because to you it makes complete sense. And in the moment when you need to access that information, it's very quick and logical for you to do so. You may later on come across someone that mentions something, and in that quick mention, you're like, oh, wait, that makes so much more sense than how I'm thinking about it. And then that may change your perception. But the fact that you are even still thinking about that piece of information at that point means that it meant something to you. And it's always because you figured it out yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Transcription, you know, when I had to do a transcription for something, I would do it. And, I guess it would be improving my ears, but it was not always like helpful to me in any way beyond that. So I shouldn't discount the way that it was helpful. But when I was scribing on my own, I just had that rule of like, I'm not interested in doing whole solos. Anything I hear that I don't know that grabs my ear, that's what I need to transcribe. And even if it's like one measure or if it's a full solo, whatever it is, that's
Mm-hmm.
kind of what it's going to be. And I'm not skipping anything. So someone would mention some album, oh, have you blah, blah, blah. And I would put it on and listen to it. And in that, I would just be making notes of all the stuff that I need to revisit. Track 4, 229 to 232, track 9, the intro, the
Mm-hmm.
unaccompanied intro, whatever it is, and just have a list of stuff. And then when I would go to practice, going through that list as much as I could do in a day, but like figuring out what it was. Why don't I know that sound already? How can I use that sound in my own play? Just like
Yeah.
in that way. And I think the stuff that I figured out from doing it that way it's still with me right now, and I can do it. I never took it through all the keys, but conceptually I understand how to do it. So I
Mm-hmm.
can play it in any key if you ask me to, like that kind
Yeah.
of thing. It's like I don't know, maybe more of an organic, I hate to use that word, but like it's just something that feels like it came naturally rather than like something I memorized and then tried to force in.
I think that's so cool. I really like just these tiny snippets, and I like that you have just like a written list of all of them that you're powering through, and it really speaks to that like time management way of thinking that you were talking about, and also just like spending all of your time on the stuff that you don't understand and getting that in your repertoire and really figuring it out. Like if you already understand all the sounds and harmonies and stuff going on for most of the song, like why are you transcribing it and spending time on it? Um,
Yeah,
that makes a lot of
yeah,
sense.
yeah. I mean, I think any practice you're doing is always it's moving in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not really a way to do it wrong. Um, but I think that for longevity, when I look at the way that this is like a lifelong learning journey where
Mm-hmm.
you're ideally going to continue to improve until you can no longer play your instrument, whatever, for whatever reason. Um, I just feel like you have to be curious about stuff, and you have to have that coming from within you, as opposed to looking for answers from other people all the time.
Yeah.
And if that's a book or if it's always needing a lesson to be inspired or needing a new recording to be inspired. I just feel like you could have one record and play gigs and have that one record and learn from it forever, because the more you play and the more experience you have, if you re-listen to that same record, you should be able to uncover different things that you didn't hear before, and then look for those things when you're then playing again, and then see how the reactions to, like I feel like it's not necessarily about having 5 million albums on Spotify at your disposal in order
Mm-hmm.
to like feel inspired, like I need new stuff. No. It's
Yeah.
like you just need something to be curious about.
Yeah. I I like that a lot. And I'm curious, as an educator, if you have a student who is like really reliant on you for direction, how do you go about fostering more self-agency and direction, like self-driven direction in your students?
Just answering questions with questions. So because I could, someone's like, well, how do you do this? It's like, well, I don't know. how do you do it? Like, what do you, I remember Mark Turner did that to me a long time ago, and it made me so furious. But like, I get it. I asked him, man, how do you practice your high notes? Like, it sounds amazing. He's like, I don't know. What do you practice? And I'm just like, okay, so you're not going to answer my question, dude?
Giving
Like
you
that
the
kind of thing.
Gandalf treatment.
Y-
It makes
Exactly.
for a terrible interview, but a great private lesson.
Exactly. And I mean it really is like you can I'm trying to think of I don't call their names out, but since we would both know them IU people, I'm trying to think who came the furthest with that. There's definitely I'll tell you later, but definitely a saxophone player that when we started, I feel like it was there was disappointment because I wasn't necessarily like telling like some big secret of how
Hmm.
this works or how that works. And kind of just like relying on them to come up with stuff. Okay, well, why don't you write an exercise that makes sense to you for this between now and next week? And then they would
That's
come
cool.
up with something, and I'd be like, see, now let's make it a little harder. And then, like that kind of thing. So I really do think that the job of like, especially one-on-one private teacher, um, it's not, I mean, it's not that you don't want to give any information or support to the student, but you do want to try to get them into a mode where they can figure stuff out for themselves, right? Because there's a semester or there's a year that you're going to be working with them. And ideally, the same as with the purpose or the mission of any school is to prepare people for afterwards, right? It's
Hmm.
when we're not here, when you're not coming to us anymore for assistance or for help or whatever. It's when you are on your own. Can you now figure out how to do this, or do you have the tools or the mindset to be able to like solve the problems that are in front of you? So, and I think that to me, that's like, it's not always about like leaving with like 500 pages of notes that you can then go look at when you have time after school. It's even if it's
When will
just like
that
your
be?
mindset. Yeah, right, exactly. Even if it's just a mindset of like what I feel that no matter what comes up, whether I can do it or not do it in that moment, I can figure out how to do it. Like if that's the thing that you leave college with, I feel like
Hmm.
you're ready for a lot of what's going to come at you.
Yeah, that's awesome. And it almost seems like as an educator, like you have one job to encourage your student to keep going and that they're on the right track, but also just as like an example of like I went through this process and I made it, and like there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's like being able to do these things, a weekly reminder of that, which is cool.
Yeah,
um
absolutely.
I have another question about social media here, and I guess I'm curious about this whole thing that I feel like I run into a lot of, like you have to be seen as really serious doing this, and like you're a serious musician or really anything. um but then like if you're lighthearted about it or you laugh at your mistakes or whatever, then people don't take you seriously. Like some of the stuff that you do on Instagram is super silly. And I don't think anyone was, well, maybe it sounds like some people say this, but no one my age is like, well, he's not a serious musician. But you've also played with Terrence Blanchard and Roy Haynes and done all these things. Do you think that approaching this in a lighthearted way, you have to earn by like some level of success before you can do it?
Right. Yeah, I mean, so I think what you're saying, like anything that you're doing, if it's putting it out, like if you're doing a recording or if it's posting something where you're playing, anything like that, um, is like a courageous act, right? Because you
Mm-hmm.
are putting out something that came from here and is or here and is going out into the world. And there's always going to be criticism towards any of it. And I think that that's part of what making art is on any level. If it's putting a picture of a Photoshop saxophone or if it's like a song that you wrote, like it doesn't matter. It's still open to criticism, and there will always be people that will criticize everything. Um, and if you're unaware of like the levels that goes to, like look at someone like LeBron James, who is like done all these amazing things for community, for social justice, for basketball, like
Hmm.
for what the NBA is for. He's like all the players that don't like him, they're making what they're making because of him, because he drives TV deals and raises them, like all that stuff. Look at his feed, how many people him. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are, what you do. That's always going to be out there. So if you're worried about it, perhaps social media is not necessarily for you
Yeah.
to to use. You have to take it all in stride, and you have to look at the end game. Where do you? It's not always about like, are people not taking me seriously for doing this? What is this? You know, it's like, where do you want to be when you, how old are you now? 22,
23.
23. Do you want to be 33 and still worrying about like, can I put this up there, or will people think it's like weird? You know what I mean? It's,
Hmm.
you have to be you, and let the chips fall where they may, because again, the people that um like the people that know you, and if they think you're really serious and then you show up and you're a different way, that may be worse than them seeing what you put and being like, yeah, it's not really for me, and not calling you in the first place. You know what I mean?
Hmm. Okay.
And then later on through music, you'll come to play with that person or whatever. I
Hmm.
mean, I don't have a good answer for it, because yeah, it's, there are people that I know look at the stuff that I do, and they hate and they think a certain thing about me.
Hmm.
Um, Again, I'm okay with it, but like you said, I also am not dependent upon that to further my career. Like I get calls all the time, even despite the ridiculous stuff that I post there.
Right.
You know what I mean? So there is a difference, and to be honest, that's like a certain form of, I guess, a certain form of privilege that I've not thought about,
Mm.
uh, because I'm not worried about what I'm putting there, and I
Hmm.
could see how that would be different for you. But so I guess my answer is I don't know, because I've not thought about that or experienced it
Yeah.
in that way. It is a real thing, I guess.
Hmm.
Have you had people get in touch with you about stuff, or say something to you?
No, but I feel like that's because I've posted mainly stuff that's like super safe. And I'm not necessarily like a super silly person, so I don't have like a ton of desire to do that, but I know other people who have felt this way, and I just wanted to get your take on it. But
Yeah, I mean,
it,
one of the things that I do see though is that sometimes people, like, it doesn't, I don't care at all, but certain musicians that are have achieved a certain level of success would like to be treated in a certain way. And sometimes people that they may not know online do something, like I've seen stuff where people will take their music and put it to something really weird and then
mhm,
tag them in it, and then they get upset about it,
yeah,
or take a picture and mess with it and then tag, or they see it and they're like, what is this, that kind of thing. So in those circumstances, I could say it's probably thin ice with certain people.
mhm,
And I wouldn't necessarily go that route. But if you're doing your own original thing that comes across with humor in it, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It's
yeah,
just, don't bring other people into your stuff
mhm,
unless you know them personally, and know that it's going to be something that they'll be on board with.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, it is interesting. I do think there's a certain amount of, or it's like social media is just a different thing for people who had a career before it started, and now it's a way
Hmm.
of like kind of solidifying that. And now you have a whole wave of people who are like trying to make a career from Instagram, and it's like
Sure.
leading to it, which I think are just very different approaches, and it's maybe sometimes hard to um, consolidate the two. And I mean, your career playing with like these giants, like at a pretty young age. I'm curious how you felt just being around these mentors and these huge musicians. I know I always feel, even having conversations like this as a young musician talking to people I really look up to, nervous and silly. And like, was it ever a big pressure on you to talk to these people? Or like when you go up to your heroes after gigs and stuff, how do you approach that? And now as a professional and you have younger musicians coming up to you, what do you think like the best way to do that is to have it be like a somewhat
Yeah.
meaningful interaction?
Well, I mean, as you grow and mature as a person, you say different things to different people. I told you about Mark.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I met Mark, I was in high school, and actually, I mentioned the Young Arts program before, but I ended up getting into that. And part of it, you go to Miami, and it's like with a small group of people that also got it. So the year I did it, there were four people. Mike Rodriguez, the trumpet player, who came to IU, and also this pianist, Danny Fox, and another saxophone player. We were a group, and then we went to New York and played at the IAJE convention, which is like what Gen is now.
Mm-hmm.
And we opened up for the Saturday night concert, and I think Tim Marsalis played with us because we needed a drummer, and then there was a bass player too. They just got guys that were at the convention already and hired them to fill in the rhythm section for us. And we were I forgot what the second group was, but the first one was this Warner Jams band. It was all the guys that were signed to Warner,
Okay.
had done an album, and that album, the second version of it, and that one was Mark Turner, James Moody, Clarence Penn. I don't remember who was playing bass. They made it because it wasn't. I don't think it was the guy on the record. Who I think is Clarence said. I think it was Larry Grenadier maybe, and Larry Goldings. So they were doing sound check right after us, and Mark walked out, and I had never heard him play. I'd never seen him, and I was like, man, this guy, like I love this record so much. And the only thing I could think to ask him, because I was like 17 at the time, I think, I was like, man, how old are you? And he was just like, and then like walked off like that, like what like what is happening? And I could see how that came across in the in a bad way. And and then the next time I saw him again, I was like, man, how do you practice your high note? Like, I
Mm-hmm.
think the main thing is it's fun to be like excited when you see someone like that, and you have like you can actually ask them a question. And I feel like just do it, like, because
Mm.
nothing bad happens. And I
Right.
feel like people people can realize the excitement of it. Like I remember walking through Monterey Jazz Festival. This is the first time like I started to realize that people were going to ask me questions like I was asking Mark. I was in the hot dog line with somebody, maybe Christian Scott or something like that, and these people were like, "No, I think that's," and like you hear your name and turn around, they're like, "Oh shit, it's him!" Like that kind of thing, and it's fun. I mean,
Yeah.
that's like what all this should be, because that's what I remember being excited about going to a concert, was because Kenny Garrett was standing like 5 feet from me, and I could like see him play and like hear him breathe and all that kind of stuff. That
Mm-hmm.
to me is like the excitement of this. Or go see whoever it is, go see Josh Redman, and dang, he moves a lot when he plays, and like that's crazy. And then if I get a chance to ask him, I'm gonna ask like, when you practice, do you like sit straight or do you move around? It's a stupid question, but like it's honestly something that I'm noticing and I really want to know. And
Mm-hmm.
if people are good sports about it, they'll answer your questions. And I don't think there's any wrong way to go about it. I think the only thing that, again, it's kind of similar to what I said about the social media tagging someone we don't know in it. Sometimes I see people become too familiar with someone in a way because you feel like you know them through social media or you know them through something else, and too familiar in a way that feels weird. Like,
Mm.
there's no other person like you would go up to and say a certain thing to them if you didn't know them. And I see it happen to people and they get really turned off by it. And they're just like, what is this problem? Like, what's going on? I think the only other key is to not linger too long,
Mm.
because that's another thing that changes a fun interaction to like, all right,
Yeah.
let's get this over with, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing. And that's not the vibe you want to have with someone that you are looking up to. Like if you go see Roy Haynes and you ask him a question and he's like, all right, yeah, cool. And you can tell he kind of, it's like, that was great. Be on your way. Don't like just kind of then post up in his dressing room. And like, yeah, great. This is really great. You know, that kind of thing. Because then it gets awkward.
Yeah, for sure. I always have the hardest time just pulling the trigger on the question or whatever. Like every time I'm at Gen or whatever, after the show, the person I want to talk to is talking to like 5 other people. And it's just like waiting around for forever for it.
Yeah.
And that always gets, I haven't figured out how to do that. Lately, I just kind of like wait in the back until like most people are gone and then go shoot my shot, which works better. But sometimes like I will have been standing there for like an ungodly amount of time waiting for a window to just say something. But that one's tough.
Yeah, no, that's a weird, I know that feeling too, but hey man, that's part of it. You talk to somebody, just hang out, wait for it.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to take up all your time. I really appreciate you sharing all this. I mean, it's a total pleasure. And maybe just one more question before we're done. I know like being in musical is super hard, especially right now with everything going on. And like there is a bit of a mental health issue, like crisis in music schools, in my opinion, of a lot of people who are just really down. And what advice do you have to students to get through music school in like the healthiest mindset possible?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, anytime that you would major in music, you have always been historically taking a risk, right? It's one of the few things where it's not any cheaper than any other degree. And when you finish it, there's no job waiting for you, you know.
Right.
It's kind of up to you to make it happen. There have been times like this where it's not a pandemic, but like there are huge changes in what the model has been. When I went to college, I started college in 1998 in the fall, and there were CD stores and major labels and like huge advances for people doing recordings and all that. By the time I finished college in 2002 or 2003 in the fall, there were iPods. There was like music was digital. There were CD burners, all this stuff. Like all the record stores were closing. Major labels were like dropping people left and right. That whole thing that I wanted to do was all gone, right? Like the entire thing was just over. So it's like, okay, so what happens next? The next thing was to figure out, you know, like, okay, what about other smaller labels that can, you know, like, or touring opportunities, or maybe not waiting for someone to hire me in their band. Maybe I should start writing. Maybe I should do an album, even though I feel like it's not time. Maybe that would be helpful for me towards starting to do my own. I guess what I'm getting at is that the script that had been written and that there was like an end game that you could look towards and work towards achieving through looking at how other people did it, or taking a slightly different route, but still having some goal to get to, was gone. And trying to figure out, well, is this, what are all the things I can be doing, and what are my friends doing, what are my peers doing, to try and, you know, to get to some kind of sense of what we had hoped and dreamed that this career would be, right? And now we're in the exact same situation where what has been normal to you all is a huge change to me, like where everyone's on social media, everything's streaming, I don't want to say nobody, but people aren't buying albums as much. Most of the stuff I'm selling is when I'm on the road, on tour. People buy more stuff. They buy all the vinyl. They do all that kind of stuff. I'm not touring. There are no gigs, right? There are venues that existed before this that are not going to be here when this is over. So the exciting and depressing thing is that everything that you may have looked towards as what your goals were, it's all gone. But the exciting part is that you all, people in your age group, people that are just finishing school, people that are in school, are going to have to figure out what the next version of this profession looks like. And you all really are going to be the ones that lead it, because like you said before, I can put stuff up on Instagram because I already had stuff going, you know, career-wise, and it's not being really affected by what I'm doing there. So I'm in a situation where when this is over, I've already played a lot of those places. I have relationships with these venues or these labels and all that kind of stuff, and I'll be able to kind of jump back in. I have people writing me all the time. I have so much stuff that got canceled or postponed that they're trying to rebook. Like when this is over, it's just a matter of me saying, yes, let's do it here. And then it's back to business, you know what I mean? And a lot of people are in that boat, but for people that aren't in that boat, what does it look like? And what are the solutions that will be found? So to me, there is excitement in that, because you have a chance to kind of write your own script as far as what your career is going to be. And you're going to be able to, somebody's going to figure out something with all this that's going to be pretty incredible, and they're going to be like a tutor for this generation as far as what you all are going to do. So that is the exciting part. It's kind of like how I felt moving to New York, where like, all right, here we go. What's going to happen? And every time my phone would ring, I'd be like, oh my God, is this going to be? And it was like, your dry cleaning is ready. You know, that kind of thing. Like the excitement and the depression constantly, the thing, but always having enough of those things to look forward to and be excited about, and knowing that, you know, something, it's leading somewhere. You just don't know what it is. It's like an unknown. And that's kind of a fun part of this. So that would be what I would say. You have the opportunity to make this whatever you can make out of it, in a way that has not been possible for like the last 20 years.
That does it for this episode of the Happy Musicians Podcast. Right now we're listening to Clem, which is track 4 off of In Common 2, written by Walter, featuring Matthew Stevens on guitar, Linda Mahon O on bass, Micah Thomas on piano, and Nate Smith on drums. If you like it, I have links to where you can purchase it, as well as a collection of my favorite offerings from Walter's discography on thehappymusicians.com. Also on the website, I have a blog that I'm very proud of. There's a daily music recommendation newsletter you can sign up for, and lots of other cool stuff. I'm quite proud of my little space of the internet, and I think you'll get a lot of value out of spending some time there. And if you do feel like you're getting any value out of your time with the Happy Musicians, I would be incredibly grateful if you could help us grow it. Share it with your friends on social media, text it to a friend, and let them know that you think they'd get something out of it. And you can leave a review and rating on Apple Podcasts, and through the magic of algorithms, it is incredibly helpful for us. It's super fast and easy and free, and it is a great way to help the Happy Musicians grow and reach more people. That's all I got. Thank you for dedicating some time and attention. I hope you'll join us next time, and until then, stay happy.